She held it up to the light like a trophy. The diamond caught the kitchen fluorescence and threw rainbows across her face. "I'm saying yes," she whispered, eyes wet with what I thought was joy. My coffee went cold in my hand. That ring, the one she claimed came from some mystery suitor, had a scratch on the band I recognized. I'd seen it before. In our bedroom. On my credit card statement. 3 months ago, labeled as costume jewelry from an online boutique. My name is Marcus Chen, and in the next hour, you'll hear how a fake engagement ring unraveled a real marriage, exposed a scheme I never saw coming, and taught me that sometimes the worst betrayals were the smile you kiss goodnight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I built my career one honest transaction at a time. Portfolio manager at Redstone Capital, managing wealth for people who trusted me with their retirement, their children's futures, their peace of mind. Numbers don't lie if you read them correctly. Patterns emerge. Trends speak. I learned to listen to what the data whispered before it shouted. At home, I thought I was applying the same principles. Pay attention. Notice changes. Trust but verify. Turns out, I was reading the wrong charts. Nicole and I met during a corporate mixer in downtown Seattle. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, sharp suit, sharper pitch, the kind of person who could sell umbrellas in the desert and make you thank her for the opportunity. We married young, 26 and 28, full of plans that sounded better in candlelight than in mortgage applications. For 8 years, we built what looked like success. A craftsman house in Ballard with a view of the Sound. 2 cars. Separate closets. Joint accounts. Date nights that became date months that became checking our phones at the same table. The drift happened so gradually I mistook it for maturity. She traveled more for work. I stayed late analyzing markets. We stopped asking about each other's days and started reporting headlines. Dinner became logistics. Bed became shift work. I told myself this was normal, that passion dims and partnership strengthens, that love at 35 looks different than love at 25. I was half right. It does look different. Sometimes it looks like a stranger sleeping 18 inches away, dreaming about someone else. The changes started small, the kind you notice only when you line them up later like receipts. New perfume. A gym membership she actually used. Laughter during phone calls that ended when I entered the room. I'm not the jealous type. I'm the analytical type. I collect data points. 3 months before the ring incident, I started seeing patterns. Nicole began requesting night shifts for client dinners that didn't appear on her company calendar, which synced to our shared digital assistant. She bought lingerie I never saw her wear. Her phone developed a password I didn't know, which was new because we'd always kept our devices open, a small gesture of transparency we'd agreed on years ago. When I asked about the password, she said her company mandated it for client privacy. Reasonable. When I asked about the late nights, she said the pharmaceutical industry was brutal and competitive. Also reasonable. When I mentioned the perfume, she smiled and said she was trying to feel attractive again, for me. That one almost worked. Almost. But I'm trained to spot inconsistencies. A woman trying to feel attractive for her husband doesn't hide new clothes in the trunk of her car. I found the shopping bags during a weekend when I borrowed her sedan because mine was in the shop. Silk blouses still tagged. Heels that cost more than our mortgage payment. Receipts that didn't match her explanations. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Men in their 30s and 40s know the difference between suspicion and proof. Suspicion makes you look paranoid. Proof makes you prepared. So I watched. I noted. I became a detective in my own home, hating every second of it but unable to stop. The guilt of spying battled with the gnawing sense that something fundamental had shifted beneath us, like a foundation cracking in slow motion. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I was inventing problems. Other nights I knew I wasn't. Seattle in winter is a study in gray. The sky, the water, the buildings all bleed into one another until you can't tell where the city ends and the weather begins. I'd grown up here, learned to love the rain, the way it washes everything clean and makes you appreciate the 10 days of summer we get each year. That February felt particularly heavy. Not just the clouds, but the air inside our house. Conversations that used to flow now stuck in our throats. Nicole smiled less. I stopped trying to make her laugh. We existed in the same space like roommates splitting rent, polite and distant and careful not to ask questions that might require real answers. Work became my refuge. The markets made sense. Bull runs, corrections, earnings reports, dividend yields. Clean data. Honest feedback. When a stock underperformed, it didn't make excuses or change the password on its quarterly filings. My team respected me. Clients trusted me. I could walk into a conference room and know exactly what role I played, what value I provided, what my presence meant. At home, I was becoming optional. A paycheck with a pulse. A name on documents. The man who remembered to take out the recycling but forgot when his wife stopped saying I love you at the end of phone calls. I started staying later at the office, not because I needed to, but because the silence there felt more honest than the silence at home. My colleague David noticed. "You good, man?" he asked one evening, standing in my doorway with his coat already on. "I'm fine," I said, eyes on a spreadsheet that didn't need my attention. He nodded, didn't push, but left a business card on my desk. "A therapist." "I appreciate it," I told him, and I did. I also threw the card away. Therapy meant admitting something was broken. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I still believed we could fix this ourselves, that one good conversation could realign us, that love was something you could troubleshoot like a bad algorithm. Looking back, I see how desperately I wanted to be wrong. How much easier it would have been to discover I was paranoid, insecure, inventing shadows where none existed. Nicole could have laughed at my concerns, shown me her calendar, explained the clothes, handed me her phone. We could have cried together, promised to do better, booked the weekend away. The story could have ended there, a minor marital hiccup, a reminder to stay connected. But that's not what happened. What happened was the ring. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays I usually got home first, had an hour to decompress before Nicole returned from whatever client dinner or hospital meeting filled her schedule. I'd pour a bourbon, check the markets, scroll through news I didn't care about, anything to delay the moment she walked in and we performed another evening of married life. That night, she came home early. I heard her car in the driveway, the engine cutting off, the doors slamming with more force than necessary. Excitement or anger, I couldn't tell. She burst through the front door holding her phone like a winning lottery ticket. "Marcus," she said, breathless, "you won't believe what just happened." I set down my glass. The look on her face was one I hadn't seen in years. Pure, unfiltered emotion. For a second, I thought maybe we'd been given a second chance, that whatever news she carried would reset us, give us something to rally around. She sat beside me on the couch, closer than she'd sat in months, and turned her phone screen toward me. On it, a photo of her hand, fingers splayed, and on her ring finger, a diamond solitaire catching light like a small fire. "He proposed," she said, voice cracking. "I'm saying yes." The room tilted. Sound went strange. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, a car passing on the street, my own heartbeat climbing into my throat. I stared at the image, then at her, then back at the image. I repeated. She nodded, tears starting now, real or rehearsed I couldn't tell. "I met someone, Marcus. I didn't plan it. It just happened. He makes me feel alive again. He sees me. He wants me." I watched her mouth move, forming words I couldn't process, and my eyes went back to the ring. Something about it tugged at me. The band had a brushed finish, not polished. The setting sat slightly crooked. And there, near the base, a thin scratch like a fingernail had dragged across metal. I knew that scratch. My brain clicked through files. 3 months ago. Credit card statement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. An online purchase. Costume jewelry. Cubic zirconia. I'd asked Nicole about it at the time, casually, just curious. She'd said it was a gift for a coworker's birthday. I'd believed her because why wouldn't I? Now, sitting inches from my wife as she sobbed about her new engagement, I realized the ring on her finger in that photo was the one I'd paid for. The one she'd bought with our money. The one she was now pretending came from another man's love and commitment. Stay calm, I told myself. Breathe. Think. My training kicked in. Data first. Emotion later. I stood, excused myself, walked to my office, and opened my laptop. I pulled up our shared credit card account, scrolled back to November, found the charge. Silverlark Boutique. $47. Cubic zirconia ring, brushed band, size 7. I took a screenshot. Then I went to her phone records, which I had access to through our family plan. Patterns emerged. A number she texted daily. Calls lasting 30, 40 minutes. Times that aligned with her late nights and early mornings. I wrote down the number. Then I opened her location history, something we'd shared for safety, for knowing when the other was close to home. The data painted a map. Her phone had been to the same apartment complex in Capitol Hill 17 times in 2 months. Always between 7 and 10 at night. Never on weekends. I saved everything. Screenshots, call logs, location pins. I created a folder on my desktop labeled Tax Documents 2024, bland enough that no one would open it. Inside, I built a timeline. Dates, times, expenses, locations. I didn't know what I'd do with this information. I just knew I needed it. Men my age understand that proof protects you when feelings fail. I returned to the living room. Nicole had stopped crying. She looked at me with something I can only describe as defiance mixed with relief. She'd been carrying this secret, and now it was out, and part of her seemed lighter for it. We need to talk, I said. She nodded. But not tonight, she replied. I need time to process. I need to figure out what this means. I almost laughed. She needed time. She'd been figuring this out for months while I paid the mortgage and believed her lies and slept beside a woman planning her exit. Sure, I said. Take your time. She went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close, not slam, just close with the finality of a chapter ending. I sat in the dark living room, the city lights reflecting off the sound outside our window, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That would come later. This was something structural. The belief that I knew my life. The assumption that marriage meant partnership. The faith that the woman I'd chosen had chosen me back. I poured another bourbon, this one deeper, and opened my laptop again. The ring stared back at me from the screenshot, fake and expensive looking and paid for with joint funds. I started drafting a plan. Not for revenge. Not yet. For clarity. I needed to know who she was texting. Where she was going. What story she'd been telling herself to justify this. I needed to understand how a woman could buy her own engagement ring, pretend it came from a lover, and announce it to her husband with tears of joy. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. But audacity doesn't pay the bills or rebuild trust. It just shows you who someone becomes when they think they've already won. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, tracking data, building spreadsheets, doing what I do best. Finding patterns in chaos. By sunrise, I had a clear picture. Nicole had been seeing someone for at least 4 months. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. Location data showed repeated visits to the same address. Phone records showed daily contact with one number. Credit card statements showed purchases that didn't fit her usual spending, meals for two at restaurants she'd never mentioned, hotel rooms during business trips that didn't align with her company's travel policy. And the ring. The fake ring she'd bought herself and staged as a proposal. That detail gnawed at me. Why fake it? If she'd met someone serious, wouldn't he buy the ring? Unless there was no proposal. Unless there was no other man. Or unless the other man wasn't who she claimed. I opened a private browser window and reverse searched the phone number. It came back registered to a Daniel Kwan, 32, worked in tech, lived in Capitol Hill. I found his social media. Public profiles, photos of hiking trips and brewery visits, a recent post about a promotion. No photos with Nicole. No relationship status. No indication he was engaged or planning to be. I screenshotted everything. Then I did something I'm not proud of but won't apologize for. I created a fake profile, generic name, stock photo, and sent him a message. Hey, I think we have a mutual friend. Nicole Harper? Just wanted to reach out. I hit send and closed the laptop. Morning came with the sound of Nicole's alarm. She moved through the house like nothing had changed, showered, dressed, poured coffee into her travel mug. I watched from the kitchen table, pretending to read news on my tablet. She glanced at me once, face neutral, then left without a word. The door closed. Her car started. I waited 10 minutes to be sure she was gone, then went upstairs to our bedroom. I'm not a snoop by nature. I respect privacy. But privacy is a privilege earned through honesty, and Nicole had spent months lying to my face. I started with her nightstand. Beneath a stack of unread books, I found a journal. I flipped it open, hands shaking slightly, and began to read. The entries were sporadic, scattered thoughts more than daily records. But they told a story. Nicole felt trapped. She'd married too young. She wanted adventure, passion, the kind of romance you see in films where people kiss in the rain and don't worry about wet shoes. She wrote about feeling invisible, about watching me work late and wondering if I even remembered she existed. Some of it hurt to read because it was true. I had been distant. I had prioritized work. I had stopped planning surprises or asking deep questions. But then the entry shifted. She wrote about meeting Daniel at a conference. How he listened. How he made her feel seen. How their friendship had grown into something more. She described their first kiss in a parking garage, the thrill of secrecy, the way her heart raced when his name appeared on her phone. And then, near the end of the journal, a plan. She would stage a proposal. Buy a ring. Tell Marcus. Force the issue. Make him the villain for holding her back from true love. She wrote that she deserved this, that she'd given enough years to a marriage that felt like a business arrangement, that Daniel represented freedom. I closed the journal and set it back exactly as I'd found it. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into something colder, more useful. She hadn't just cheated. She'd orchestrated a narrative where I was the obstacle and she was the brave heroine choosing herself. The fake ring wasn't a mistake. It was a prop. A piece of theater designed to make her exit look noble. I went back downstairs, opened my laptop, and checked the fake profile I'd created. Daniel had responded. Hey, yeah, I know Nicole. We work in similar circles. What's up? I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could expose everything right now. Send him screenshots. Tell him she's married. Blow up her fantasy before it fully formed. But that felt too easy, too quick. I wanted her to do it herself. I wanted to watch her walk into the consequences of her choices with full awareness. So I replied, just wanted to connect. Heard great things. Maybe we can grab coffee sometime. He agreed. We set a date for the following week. I logged out, deleted the browser history, and went to work. At the office, I functioned on autopilot. Answered emails. Took calls. Reviewed portfolios. My team noticed nothing unusual. I've always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping personal chaos from bleeding into professional performance. But inside, I was running calculations. Divorce would mean splitting assets, selling the house, unwinding 8 years of joint finances. I'd survive financially. The question was whether I wanted to fight or walk away clean. Some men burn everything down. Others take the high road and lose their shirts. I needed a third option. Something that protected me without destroying her, because despite everything, I didn't want to be the kind of man who weaponizes pain. That evening, Nicole came home late again. She didn't offer an explanation. I didn't ask for one. We moved around each other like chess pieces, careful not to touch, each waiting for the other to make the next move. She reheated leftovers. I pretended to watch television. The fake ring sat on her finger now, a constant reminder of the performance we were both trapped in. At one point, she held up her hand, admiring the stone under the lamp light. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, more to herself than to me. I nodded. "Sure is." She looked at me then, searching for something. Permission, maybe. Or guilt. She found neither. Just a man watching his wife play a role she'd written for herself. Later, in bed, she stayed on her side. I stayed on mine. The space between us felt like miles. I listened to her breathing, waiting for it to even out, to signal sleep. When it did, I got up quietly, went to my office, and opened the folder of evidence. I added notes from the journal. Screenshots of Daniel's social media. A timeline of her location history. Everything organized, labeled, undeniable. I wasn't building a case for court. I was building a case for clarity. When the moment came, and it would come, I wanted facts that couldn't be argued or reframed. I wanted the truth to be so loud she couldn't talk over it. The next morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I'd let her think she was in control, let her continue the charade, let her dig deeper into the story she'd constructed. People reveal themselves when they feel safe. Nicole thought I was oblivious, that I'd accepted her announcement without question, that I was too passive to challenge her. She was wrong. I was documenting. And when the time came, I'd show her exactly what I'd been watching. Not with anger. With evidence. The kind that doesn't yell because it doesn't need to. Days passed. Nicole grew bolder. She talked about Daniel openly now, describing him as kind, successful, everything she'd been missing. She painted me as the distant husband who'd let the marriage die through neglect. Some of it was true. Most of it was revision. She was rewriting our history to justify her present, turning 8 years of partnership into a prison she'd heroically escaped. I let her talk. I nodded in the right places. I played the part of the man too tired to fight. And all the while, I was preparing. Not for war. For the moment when truth would finally have its say. The coffee meeting with Daniel was set for Tuesday morning. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the door, and waited. He walked in at 10 sharp, exactly as promised. Tall, clean-cut, the kind of confident that comes from never having been truly tested. He spotted me, waved, ordered a latte, and sat down with the ease of someone who thought this was just a friendly networking chat. "Thanks for meeting," I said. He smiled. "Of course. Always good to expand the circle." We made small talk. Tech industry trends. Seattle's housing market. Surface-level conversation that felt like a waste of time until I shifted gears. "So, how well do you know Nicole?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Daniel's expression flickered. Confusion, then caution. "We've worked some events together." "Why?" I leaned back, let the silence stretch. "Just curious." "She mentioned you recently." He set down his cup. "Mention me how?" I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot of her hand with the ring, and slid it across the table. "She showed me this. Said you proposed." The color drained from his face. He stared at the image, then at me, then back at the image. I didn't propose, he said slowly. I didn't give her that ring. I know, I replied. She bought it herself. 3 months ago. $47 online. I have the receipt. Daniel's hands went flat on the table. Who are you? Marcus Chen, I said. Nicole's husband. The word landed like a grenade. He pushed back from the table, stood, sat back down, ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know, he said finally. She told me she was divorced. That it was finalized last year. That she was starting fresh. I let him process. People need time to adjust when their reality gets reframed. After a moment, I spoke again. How long have you been seeing her? For months, he said quietly. We met at a medical conference. She seemed amazing. Smart, funny, independent. I thought I'd found someone real. You did, I said. Just not the version she sold you. We sat in that coffee shop for another 30 minutes. I showed him the evidence. Location data. Call logs. The journal entries. He looked sick, the way men look when they realize they've been played. I didn't show him everything out of cruelty. I showed him because he deserved the truth, and because I needed him to understand he wasn't the villain. Neither was I. There was only one person writing this story, and she'd cast us both as props. When we finished, Daniel apologized. Repeatedly. I told him I didn't need his apology. I needed his honesty when the time came. He agreed. We shook hands. He left looking 10 years older than when he'd walked in. I stayed at the coffee shop, staring at the cold remains of my drink, and felt something shift. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just the quiet understanding that the next phase was beginning. Nicole had built her fantasy on lies that were now exposed. Daniel would confront her. She'd scramble, revise, try to salvage the narrative. And I'd be there, not with anger, but with the one thing she couldn't argue against. The truth, documented and undeniable. I paid the check, walked out into the gray Seattle morning, and felt the rain on my face like a baptism. The storm was coming. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of it. That evening, I got home before Nicole. I made dinner, set the table, poured 2 glasses of wine. When she arrived, she looked surprised. What's this? She asked. Dinner, I said simply. I thought we could talk. She hesitated, then sat. We ate in silence for a few minutes before she spoke. I've been thinking, Marcus. Maybe we should see a counselor. Try to work through this before I make any final decisions. I set down my fork. Final decisions, I repeated. She nodded. About us. About what's next. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I slid it across the table. What's that? She asked. Everything, I said. Her face went pale. Nicole stared at the flash drive like it might detonate. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass, took a long sip, set it down with deliberate care. What's on it? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I kept my expression neutral, the same face I use when delivering bad news to clients about market corrections. Everything I've collected over the past 3 months. Call logs. Location data. Credit card statements. Photos. The journal entries from your nightstand. Her eyes widened. You went through my things? The indignation in her tone would have been impressive if it weren't so misplaced. You announced your engagement to another man in our living room, I replied evenly. Privacy became a secondary concern. She pushed back from the table, stood, paced to the window overlooking the sound. The city lights reflected off the water, a view we'd chosen together when we bought this house, back when we still made decisions as a unit. How dare you, she said, but the words lacked conviction. She knew she was cornered. I could hear it in the way her voice wavered, the way her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. I stayed seated, hands folded on the table, letting silence do the heavy lifting. Men learn this in boardrooms and negotiations. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. After a long moment, she turned back to face me. So what now? You're going to blackmail me? Threaten me? Ruin me? I shook my head slowly. None of that. I'm going to give you a choice. Her eyes narrowed. What choice? You can tell me the truth, right now, all of it, and we can figure out how to end this marriage with some dignity intact. Or you can keep lying, and I'll make sure everyone who matters sees what's on that drive. Your family. Your employer. Daniel. She flinched at his name. You talked to him, she said. It wasn't a question. I met him this morning, I confirmed. Nice guy. Thought you were divorced. Seemed pretty shocked to learn otherwise. Nicole's face cycled through emotions too fast to catalog. Anger, fear, embarrassment, calculation. She was trying to find an angle, a way to spin this, but every exit was blocked. I'd spent 3 months building a case that had no gaps, no room for interpretation. Finally, she sank back into her chair, shoulders sagging. What do you want to know? Everything, I said. Start with when it actually began. She took a shaky breath and started talking. The affair had begun 6 months ago, not 4 like Daniel believed. They'd met at a pharmaceutical conference in Portland. He'd approached her at a networking mixer, complimented her presentation, asked if she wanted to grab a drink. 1 drink became 3. 3 became a kiss in the hotel hallway. The kiss became a night she swore she'd never repeat. But she did repeat it. Again and again. At first, it was purely physical, she claimed. An escape from a marriage that felt more like a business partnership than a romance. She said she'd convinced herself it wasn't really cheating because her heart wasn't involved, just her body, as if that distinction mattered. I listened without interrupting, letting her unspool the story she'd been carrying. Daniel fell for her quickly. Started talking about futures and possibilities. Nicole panicked. She'd never intended for it to become serious. But the attention felt intoxicating after years of feeling invisible at home. So instead of ending it, she leaned in. Started imagining a different life. One where she wasn't Marcus Chen's wife but Nicole Harper, the woman who chose passion over security. The ring was her idea. She'd seen it online, a cheap imitation that looked expensive in photos. She bought it on a whim, thinking maybe she'd use it as a prop someday, a way to test the waters, to see how it felt to imagine herself engaged to someone else. Then, 3 weeks ago, Daniel had mentioned he was falling in love with her. That he wanted something real. Nicole made a decision. She'd force the issue. Stage a proposal that never happened. Show me the ring. Make me the obstacle. Paint herself as the brave woman choosing authentic love over a dead marriage. If I got angry, she'd have proof I was the problem. If I didn't fight for her, she'd have proof I never cared. Either way, she won the narrative. Except she didn't account for me noticing the scratch on the band. Didn't think I'd check our credit card statements or track her location or meet with Daniel. She'd underestimated me, mistaken quiet for passive, assumed I'd simply accept whatever story she sold. That was her first mistake. Her second was thinking she could rewrite 8 years of history to justify 4 months of betrayal. I let her finish, then asked the question that mattered most. Do you love him? She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like years. I don't know, she admitted. I love the idea of him. The excitement. The newness. But I don't really know him. Not like I know you. The honesty was almost worse than the lies. At least lies have edges you can fight against. This formless confession of wanting something she couldn't even define, it left nothing to argue with. I stood, picked up the flash drive, and put it back in my pocket. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow, you're going to call a lawyer. We're going to file for divorce. Uncontested. I'll give you 60 days to move out. We'll split assets according to state law. And you're going to tell Daniel the truth, all of it, tonight. She opened her mouth to protest. I held up a hand. Those are the terms. Non-negotiable. You try to drag this out or paint me as the villain, and that flash drive goes public. Do we understand each other? She nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. I felt nothing watching her cry. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just a bone-deep weariness that comes from investing years in something that was already crumbling from the inside. I left her at the table and went upstairs to the guest room. I'd been sleeping there for the past week anyway, ever since her announcement. The bed was narrow and the room smelled like storage, but it was mine. No shared space. No pretense. Just a man and the wreckage of his marriage, separated by a hallway that might as well have been an ocean. That night, I heard her on the phone. Her voice carried through the walls, muffled but distinct. She was talking to Daniel. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught the shape of it. Apologies. Explanations. The sound of a fantasy collapsing in real time. The call lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, I heard her crying, deep sobs that shook the floorboards. Part of me wanted to go to her, to offer comfort the way I had 1,000 times over 8 years. But that instinct belonged to a different version of me, one who still believed in salvaging what was already lost. This version knew better. Comfort would only confuse the message. We were done. The marriage was over. All that remained was the paperwork and the packing. Morning arrived with gray light and the sound of Nicole moving through the house. I stayed in the guest room until I heard her car leave, then got up and made coffee. The kitchen felt different now, like a stage after the show is closed. Props still in place but stripped of meaning. I sat at the table where we'd eaten our last dinner together and opened my laptop. First item on the agenda was finding my own lawyer. I'd done research over the past weeks, read reviews, checked credentials. I needed someone who understood high-asset divorce, who could protect my portfolio and my reputation without turning this into a circus. I found a firm downtown, called, and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Next, I drafted an email to my financial advisor. Short, professional, matter of fact. Nicole and I are separating. Please freeze joint accounts and prepare documentation for asset division. I need a full audit of our holdings by end of week. I hit send and watched the message disappear into the digital void. Each action felt mechanical, like I was following a protocol written by someone else. Maybe I was. Men of a certain age carry templates for crisis. Death, divorce, disaster. You activate the checklist and let muscle memory carry you through the parts where feeling would slow you down. By noon, I'd made 8 calls. Lawyer, accountant, bank, insurance company, HR department to update beneficiaries, property manager to discuss the house, a moving company to get quotes, and my father. That last one was the hardest. Dad had always liked Nicole, thought we were solid. Hearing the disappointment in his voice when I explained the situation made my chest tight. But he didn't offer platitudes or ask if I'd tried hard enough. He just said, "You need anything, you call." That's what good fathers do. They show up without making it about themselves. I told him I loved him and hung up before my voice could crack. The lawyer's office was all glass and steel, designed to project competence and discretion. Helen Ortega met me in the lobby, firm handshake, gray suit, the kind of calm that comes from seeing the worst of human behavior and still believing in order. We sat in a conference room with a view of Elliott Bay. I handed her the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop and started scrolling through files. Her expression never changed, but I saw her make notes, highlight certain documents, tab between folders with practiced efficiency. After 15 minutes, she looked up. "This is thorough," she said. "Almost too thorough. You're sure you obtained all of this legally?" I explained our shared accounts, shared devices, the family location plan we'd both agreed to. Nothing I'd accessed required hacking or subterfuge. It was all information I had permission to see, just compiled in a way that told a story Nicole hadn't wanted told. Helen nodded. Good. That keeps it admissible if she decides to contest anything, though based on what I'm seeing, she'd be foolish to fight. Washington is a no-fault state, but this level of documentation will protect you if she tries to claim emotional distress or seeks a larger share of assets. We spent the next hour going through financials. The house, worth approximately $800,000 with $300,000 left on the mortgage. Retirement accounts, investments, savings, all tallied and divided according to community property laws. My portfolio from work, kept separate, wouldn't be touched. Neither would her pension. We'd each walk away with roughly what we'd brought in, plus half of what we'd built together. Fair, if not exactly satisfying. Helen outlined the timeline. File this week. Serve Nicole within 10 days. 60-day waiting period before the divorce could be finalized, standard in Washington. If Nicole cooperated, we could be done by summer. If she fought, it could drag into next year. I told Helen about the agreement Nicole and I had reached. Uncontested. 60 days to move out. Clean split. Helen made more notes. I'll draft the papers today. You can review tomorrow. Once you sign, there's no going back. I met her eyes. I'm already gone, I said. This is just making it official. She smiled slightly, the kind of smile lawyers give when they recognize someone who's made peace with hard decisions. I'll have everything ready by morning. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt lighter but not relieved. Lighter because I'd set things in motion, because the limbo of the past weeks was ending. Not relieved because divorce isn't a victory, it's an amputation. You remove what's dying to save what's left. I drove to the waterfront, parked, and walked along the pier. Tourists snapped photos. Seagulls fought. Over scraps. The ferry horn blasted as it pulled away from the dock. Life continued, indifferent to my personal collapse. There was something comforting in that. The world didn't stop because my marriage ended. Bills still needed paying. Work still needed doing. The sun would set and rise again whether I was married or single. My phone buzzed. A text from Nicole. I talked to Daniel. It's over. He doesn't want anything to do with me. I stared at the message, trying to summon sympathy. I couldn't. She'd built a fantasy on lies and was now shocked that it crumbled when exposed to light. I typed a brief response. Lawyers filing papers this week. You'll be served next Monday. Make arrangements. I didn't wait for her reply. Just pocketed the phone and kept walking. The thing about betrayal is it clarifies. You spend years wondering if you're doing enough, being enough, loving enough. Then someone shows you exactly how little your effort mattered. It hurts, but it also releases you. You stop auditing yourself and start rebuilding. That evening, I went to my brother's place in Fremont. Ryan was 2 years younger, worked in software, lived in a converted loft that smelled like coffee and solder. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. No words. Just presence. We ordered Thai food and sat on his balcony watching the neighborhood wind down. I told him everything. The ring. The affair. The coffee meeting with Daniel. The lawyer. He listened the way good brothers do, without interrupting or offering solutions, just bearing witness. When I finished, he asked one question. How are you, really? I considered lying, saying I was fine, keeping up the armor I'd worn all day. But this was Ryan. We'd shared a room growing up, knew each other's fears and failures. I'm angry, I admitted. Not just at her. At myself. For not seeing it sooner. For letting us drift. For believing that as long as we were polite to each other, we were okay. Ryan shook his head. You can't own her choices, Marcus. She made this mess. You're just cleaning it up. He was right, intellectually. But emotionally, I kept running through the past year, looking for the moment I could have saved us. Maybe if I'd come home earlier. Asked better questions. Planned more dates. Fought harder when I felt her pulling away. The list of maybe-ifs was endless and useless. We sat in silence for a while, the city humming below us. Eventually Ryan spoke again. You know what I think? I think you loved her the best way you knew how. And she chose to throw it away because she wanted something shiny and new. That's on her. Not you. You get to walk away knowing you showed up. She doesn't. Those words settled somewhere deep. I didn't fully believe them yet, but I filed them away for later, for the nights when doubt would creep back in. I stayed at Ryan's until past midnight, grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that I had people who'd stand with me even when I felt like collapsing. Driving home, I realized I'd stopped thinking of the house as home. It was just the place where my stuff lived until I found somewhere else. Nicole was asleep when I got back, or pretending to be. I didn't check. Just went to the guest room and lay in the dark, processing the day. Tomorrow the papers would be ready. Next week she'd be served. In 60 days, we'd be legally dissolved. The mechanics were simple. The emotional untangling would take longer. You don't share 8 years of your life with someone and walk away clean. There would be songs I couldn't listen to. Restaurants I'd avoid. Mutual friends who'd have to choose sides. The debris field of a failed marriage spreads wider than the explosion itself. But lying there in that narrow bed, I also felt something unexpected. Not hope exactly. More like space. Room to imagine a future that wasn't tethered to someone else's lies. I could move anywhere. Date anyone. Build a life based on what I actually wanted instead of what looked good on paper. The prospect was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I'd spent my entire adult life as part of a pair. Now I'd have to remember how to be singular. How to make decisions without consulting someone else. How to fill evenings and weekends with meaning instead of obligation. It felt like learning to walk again after years in a wheelchair. Possible, but requiring more effort than I'd anticipated. Sleep came eventually, thin and restless. I dreamed of documents that wouldn't sign, of rings that multiplied every time I tried to throw them away, of Nicole standing in doorways I couldn't close. I woke at dawn, sweating, disoriented. The guest room window faced east, and harsh light poured through the blinds. I got up, showered, dressed for work. Routine is armor. If I kept moving, kept checking boxes, the feelings couldn't catch up. That strategy had gotten me through the past weeks. It would get me through the next 60 days. At the office, I buried myself in client portfolios. Market analysis. Rebalancing strategies. Problems with clear solutions and quantifiable outcomes. My assistant commented that I seemed focused. I told her I'd gotten good sleep, which was a lie, but a harmless one. The truth had no place in a professional setting. I was learning to compartmentalize in ways I never had before. Work Marcus was calm, competent, available. Home Marcus was a mess held together by willpower and logistics. The two couldn't meet or the whole structure would collapse. Mid-morning, Helen emailed the divorce papers. I reviewed them over lunch, sitting in my office with the door closed. The language was stark, clinical. Petitioner seeks dissolution of marriage due to irreconcilable differences. Both parties agree to equitable distribution of community property. No children involved. Reading our marriage reduced to legal jargon felt surreal. 8 years summarized in 12 pages. Everything we'd built, dreamed, argued about, boiled down to asset lists and custody of furniture. I signed electronically, initialed each page, and sent them back. Done. The legal dissolution had begun. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marcus Chen? A woman's voice asked. Yes, I replied. This is Amanda Reeves. I'm Daniel Kwan's sister. I understand you met with my brother earlier this week. My stomach tightened. I did, I said carefully, unsure where this was going. I wanted to thank you, she continued. Daniel's been a wreck since that coffee. But he needed to know. He's too trusting. He would have married that woman without realizing what she was capable of. You saved him from a massive mistake. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't trying to save Daniel. I was trying to save myself. But Amanda kept talking. She told me Daniel had dated women who'd lied before, who'd used him for money or status or just the thrill of having a nice guy on standby. He'd developed a pattern of ignoring red flags because he wanted to see the best in people. Nicole had been the worst of them, promising a future while hiding a present. That included a husband and a house and a life she'd never mentioned. Amanda's voice cracked slightly. He's my little brother. I'm supposed to protect him. But you did it instead. I appreciate that more than you know. We talked for a few more minutes. She offered to buy me a drink sometime, as thanks. I politely declined. I wasn't looking for new connections or gratitude. I just wanted to get through each day without falling apart. But her call did something unexpected. It reminded me that my actions had consequences beyond my own pain. By exposing Nicole's lies, I'd protected someone else from experiencing what I was going through. There was a strange comfort in that. A sense that maybe this nightmare served some purpose, even if I couldn't see it yet. That evening, I came home to find Nicole in the kitchen, packing dishes into boxes. She looked up when I entered, eyes red-rimmed. The papers came today, she said. I know, I replied. She set down the plate she was wrapping. This is really happening. I nodded. It really is. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I never wanted it to end like this. Then you shouldn't have bought a fake ring and staged a proposal, I said quietly. She flinched. I know. I messed up. I just felt so stuck, Marcus. So invisible. I wanted to feel alive again. I leaned against the counter, exhausted by the circular nature of this conversation. We had versions of it a dozen times over the past week. Nicole trying to explain the inexplicable. Me trying to find meaning in choices that had none. You could have told me you were unhappy, I said. We could have gone to counseling. Worked on it. Left honorably. Instead, you lied for months and then tried to make me the villain. That's not feeling stuck. That's cowardice. The words hung between us, harsh but true. She didn't argue. Just went back to wrapping dishes, moving through the kitchen like a ghost haunting her own life. I went upstairs and started my own packing. Clothes first. Then books. Personal items that had meaning only to me. Photos from before Nicole, when my life was simpler and smaller. I filled 3 boxes and stacked them in the corner of the guest room. It felt good to sort, to separate mine from ours, to reclaim space in increments. This was how healing would happen. Not in grand gestures, but in small acts of disentanglement. One drawer at a time. One memory at a time. Until the life I'd shared with Nicole became the life I'd once had, past tense, historical, no longer bleeding into my present. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of logistics. Nicole found an apartment in Belltown, signed a lease, started moving boxes. I stayed out of her way, let her take what she wanted from the shared items. Furniture, kitchen stuff, decorations that had always been more her taste than mine. The house emptied slowly. What remained was stark but mine. I bought a new couch. A new bed for the master bedroom, which I reclaimed once she moved out. I repainted the living room, a color she'd always vetoed. Small acts of reclamation. Tiny rebellions that helped me remember I'd existed before her and would exist after. Work became my anchor. I took on extra clients, stayed late, volunteered for projects that required focus and left no room for introspection. My team noticed the shift. Some asked if I was okay. I told them I was going through a divorce but preferred not to discuss it. Most respected that boundary. A few shared their own stories, wore wounds from marriages that hadn't survived. There was a fraternity in it, or recognition that passed between men who'd been gutted and were learning to function around the absence. One night, I met Tyler for dinner. He was a college friend who'd moved to Portland but was in town for work. We'd stayed close over the years, the kind of friendship that picks up seamlessly even after months apart. I told him about Nicole, the ring, the divorce. He listened with the focus of someone who'd seen hard times himself. His own marriage had ended 5 years earlier under different circumstances, but the shape of the grief was familiar. When I finished, he said something that stuck. "You know what the gift is in all this?" I shook my head. "You get to decide who you are now. Not who you were with her. Not who she needed you to be. Just who you actually are." The idea felt both liberating and terrifying. I'd been Marcus, Nicole's husband, for so long that I'd forgotten there were other versions of me. Marcus before Nicole. Marcus the friend. Marcus the brother. Marcus the son. Those identities had been background, treated as supporting roles to the main narrative of marriage and career. Now I had a chance to foreground them again. To remember what I liked, what I wanted, what made me feel like myself instead of someone's partner. It would take time. But time was the one thing I suddenly had in abundance. By early April, the divorce was nearly finalized. Nicole had moved out completely. We divided assets according to the agreement. She'd taken her share of the savings and her car. I'd kept the house, which required refinancing the mortgage in my name alone. The process was tedious but straightforward. Helen guided me through each step, ensuring everything was documented, signed, irrevocable. On a Tuesday morning, I got the email I'd been waiting for. The court had approved the dissolution. We were officially divorced. I read the message twice, waiting to feel something. Relief, sadness, anger. What came instead was a quiet sense of closure. It was done. The chapter had ended. I forwarded the email to my father, my brother, and a handful of close friends. The responses were uniformly supportive. "Congratulations on your freedom. You did the right thing. Proud of you." Each message felt like a brick in the foundation I was rebuilding. Evidence that I wasn't alone, that people I trusted believed I'd handled this with integrity. That mattered more than I expected. When your marriage fails, there's a voice that whispers you're the problem, that if you'd been better, loved smarter, tried harder, it wouldn't have fallen apart. Having people outside the situation confirm that wasn't true helped silence that voice. That weekend, I drove to the coast. Cannon Beach, a place I'd always loved but rarely visited because Nicole found it too touristy. I checked into a small inn, walked the sand for hours, watched the waves hammer Haystack Rock with relentless patience. The ocean doesn't care about your problems. It just keeps moving, eroding cliffs and smoothing stones, indifferent to human drama. There was peace in that indifference. A reminder that my pain, however acute, was small against the backdrop of geological time. The world would keep turning. I would keep breathing. And eventually, the sharp edges of this experience would soften into something I could carry without bleeding. On the drive back to Seattle, I made a decision. I wouldn't date for a while. Maybe a year. Maybe longer. I needed to relearn how to be alone without being lonely, how to fill my own time with meaning instead of distraction. Jumping into a new relationship would just be another way of avoiding the work I needed to do on myself. So I'd focus on that. Therapy, maybe. Hobbies I'd abandoned. Friendships I'd neglected. The unglamorous labor of becoming whole again. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I barely recognized the man staring back from the bathroom mirror. Not because I looked different, though I'd lost some weight and let my hair grow slightly longer than Nicole had preferred. The change was deeper. In my eyes. In the way I held my jaw. There was a steadiness there that hadn't existed during those final years of marriage. A certainty that comes from surviving something you thought might destroy you and discovering you're still standing. The house had transformed from a museum of our failed relationship into something that felt genuinely mine. I'd replaced the furniture she took with pieces I actually liked. A leather reading chair that didn't match anything but fit perfectly in the corner by the window. Bookshelves filled with volumes I'd wanted to read but never had time for. The kitchen table where we'd had that final conversation now held my laptop and a French press I used every morning. Small changes that added up to a complete renovation of not just the space, but my relationship to it. Work continued to ground me. I'd been promoted to senior portfolio manager in July, a recognition of the extra hours and focus I'd poured into my career during the divorce aftermath. The raise allowed me to comfortably afford the house on my own, which felt like a quiet victory. Financial independence after a marriage ends isn't just practical, it's psychological. Every mortgage payment I made alone was proof I didn't need someone else to maintain the life I'd built. I could stand on my own foundation. I'd also started therapy, something I'd resisted for months before finally admitting I needed help processing everything. Dr. Sarah Kim met with me every other Wednesday, and those sessions became a space where I could dismantle the guilt I'd been carrying. She helped me see the difference between responsibility and blame. Yes, I'd been distant during the final year of my marriage. Yes, I could have communicated better. But Nicole's decision to have an affair, to lie repeatedly, to stage an engagement with a fake ring, those choices were hers alone. I didn't cause them. I couldn't have prevented them. That distinction mattered. Through therapy, I also confronted something uncomfortable. I'd stayed in an unhappy marriage longer than I should have because leaving felt like failure. I'd built my identity around being reliable, steady, someone who kept commitments no matter what. That trait served me well in business but had kept me tethered to a relationship that was slowly suffocating both of us. Nicole wasn't the only one who'd checked out emotionally. I had too. I'd just expressed it differently, through work obsession rather than infidelity. We'd both been cowards in our own ways. She'd just been more spectacular about it. In September, I ran into Daniel Kwan at a tech conference downtown. We made eye contact across the exhibition hall, and for a moment I considered pretending I hadn't seen him. But he walked over, extending his hand with a tentative smile. "Marcus," he said. "I didn't expect to see you here." We found a quiet corner away from the vendor booths. The conversation was awkward at first, two men connected by the woman who'd betrayed them both. But as we talked, something unexpected happened. We laughed. About the absurdity of the fake ring. About how we'd both been so thoroughly deceived. About the coffee shop meeting where I'd blown up his reality with a flash drive and receipts. Daniel had moved on, he told me. Started dating someone new, a woman who worked at his company and was refreshingly straightforward about what she wanted. He seemed lighter than the shell-shocked man I'd met months earlier. Before we parted, he said something that surprised me. "Thank you for being honest with me. I know it wasn't about helping me. But you did anyway." I told him the truth. I didn't want either of us to keep living in her fabricated reality. We deserved better. We shook hands again, and this time it felt less like collateral damage acknowledging each other and more like two survivors comparing notes after the storm passed. October brought an unexpected development. I received a message through LinkedIn from Margaret, Nicole's mother. We'd only met a handful of times during the marriage, polite interactions at holidays where she'd assessed me with the critical eye of someone evaluating an investment. Her message was brief. "I'd like to speak with you if you're willing. No pressure. I have some things I need to say." My first instinct was to delete it. What could she possibly need to say that would matter now? But curiosity won. I agreed to meet for coffee at a neutral location, the same shop where I'd met Daniel months earlier. Margaret arrived precisely on time, dressed in the understated elegance of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. She ordered tea, settled into her chair, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thank you for meeting me," she began. "I know you have no reason to give me your time." I waited. She took a breath. "I owe you an apology." When Nicole told me about the divorce, she painted a very different picture. "Made you sound controlling, emotionally absent, unwilling to let her grow." I believed her because she's my daughter and that's what mothers do. But over the past months, things have come to light. Details she couldn't spin. I've realized the version she sold me was carefully edited. Margaret explained that Nicole had moved back home temporarily after her Belltown apartment lease ended. Living together had revealed cracks in the narrative Nicole had constructed. She'd caught Nicole in several lies about money, about where she was going, about who she was seeing. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Then Margaret had found something while cleaning Nicole's old room. The receipt for the ring. The fake engagement ring. Still in a drawer, along with printouts of the photos Nicole had shown me that night. Margaret had confronted her daughter. Nicole had eventually confessed everything. The affair. The staged proposal. The lies she'd told to make herself the victim and me the villain. I sat across from this woman who'd raised the person who'd blown up my life, and I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Pity. Margaret looked exhausted, aged by the revelation that her daughter was capable of calculated deception. She'd come here to apologize not just for believing Nicole's story, but for raising someone who'd construct such an elaborate lie in the first place. I could see the guilt weighing on her. The questions every parent asks when their child does something unforgivable. Where did I go wrong? What did I miss? I appreciated the apology, I told her honestly. But you don't owe me anything. Nicole's choices are her own. You didn't make them. Margaret's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She's my daughter. I love her. But I don't like who she's become. She paused, composing herself. I wanted you to know that not everyone in her family believed her version. And I wanted you to know I'm sorry for what she put you through. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked about my life now, and I gave her the highlights. The house. The promotion. The therapy. She seemed genuinely pleased that I was rebuilding. When we parted, she squeezed my hand. You deserved better than what my daughter gave you. I hope you find it. I watched her walk to her car and felt a chapter one didn't know was still open finally close. By November, I'd established a new rhythm. Morning runs along the waterfront. Weeknight dinners with friends I'd neglected during the marriage. Weekend projects around the house, small improvements that made the space feel more intentionally mine. I'd reconnected with hobbies I'd abandoned. Started playing guitar again, badly at first, muscle memory returning slowly. Joined a recreational basketball league with guys from work, where the only thing that mattered was whether you could make the pass. Simple pleasures that had gotten lost in the complexity of maintaining a failing marriage. I also started volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching basic investing principles to young adults. It felt good to use my skills for something beyond building portfolios for people who already had wealth. The students were hungry to learn, asked smart questions, reminded me why I'd fallen in love with finance in the first place. It wasn't about the money. It was about understanding how systems worked and using that knowledge to build security. Every class I taught reinforced a truth I'd temporarily forgotten. I was good at what I did. I had value beyond being someone's husband. One evening in early December, my brother Ryan called. He was getting married. Spring wedding, small ceremony, just close family and friends. He wanted me to be his best man. I felt genuine happiness for the first time in months. Ryan had found someone who matched him perfectly, challenged him without diminishing him, built a partnership that looked nothing like what I'd had with Nicole. Their relationship was a reminder that marriage itself wasn't the problem. The problem was marrying someone who saw you as a supporting character in their story rather than a co-author of a shared narrative. I threw myself into best man duties. Organized the bachelor party, wrote a speech that balanced humor with sincerity, made sure every detail of the wedding day ran smoothly. Standing next to Ryan as he married Claire, I felt no bitterness about my own failed marriage. Just gratitude that my brother had found what I hadn't. During the reception, an older uncle pulled me aside. Heard about your divorce, he said. Tough break. But you know what? Sometimes the best thing that happens to you looks like the worst thing at first. You'll see. He was right. I was already seeing it. The new year arrived with unusual clarity. I made a list of goals that had nothing to do with career or relationships. Learn to cook properly instead of surviving on takeout. Read 50 books. Take a solo trip somewhere I'd never been. Train for a half marathon. Small, achievable targets that would give me a sense of forward motion without the pressure of grand transformation. I wasn't trying to become a different person. I was trying to become a fuller version of the person I already was, the parts that had been compressed and minimized during 8 years of trying to fit someone else's vision. In February, almost exactly a year after Nicole had shown me the fake ring, I got an unexpected email. It was from her. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The message was 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No justifications. Just an acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused and an apology for the lies, the manipulation, the cowardice of how she'd ended things. She didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. She just said she'd been doing her own therapy, facing hard truths about herself, and wanted me to know she understood the damage she'd done. The email ended with a single line. "You deserve so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found it." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge her apology or tell her I'd moved on. But I realized I didn't need to. The apology was for her, a step in whatever healing process she was navigating. I'd already done my healing without her. Responding would just reopen a door I'd carefully closed. So I let it sit, unanswered, a message sent into the void that didn't require a reply. Sometimes silence is the kindest response you can give. Spring brought renewal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The house felt fully mine now, every room holding memories I'd created alone rather than ghosts of a shared past. I'd started dating casually, nothing serious, just reminding myself what it felt like to connect with someone new without the weight of expectation. Some dates were awkward. Some were pleasant. None of them were Nicole, which was exactly the point. I was learning what I actually wanted in a partner rather than accepting what was available. Work continued to thrive. I'd been asked to speak at an industry conference about portfolio management strategies. Public speaking had never been my strength, but I prepared thoroughly and delivered a presentation I was genuinely proud of. Several people approached me afterward with questions and compliments. One woman, a wealth manager from Portland, asked if I'd be interested in consulting for her firm. We exchanged information. It felt good to be recognized for my expertise rather than just my reliability. On a Saturday morning in April, I was at the farmer's market buying vegetables I'd actually learned to cook when I saw her. Nicole. She was with someone, a man I didn't recognize, laughing at something he'd said. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowd. She looked different. Softer somehow. Less polished. More real. She gave me a small nod, not quite a smile, just an acknowledgement. I nodded back. And then we both moved on, strangers who'd once shared a life, now just 2 people buying produce on a sunny morning. I felt nothing watching her walk away. No anger. No longing. No unfinished business clawing at my chest. Just a distant recognition that she'd been part of my story but wasn't part of my present. That realization felt like the final piece of healing clicking into place. I'd survived the betrayal. Navigated the divorce. Rebuilt my life. And now I could see my ex-wife in public without it ruining my day. That was growth. That was freedom. Later that afternoon, sitting on my back deck with a book and coffee, I thought about the journey from that night she'd shown me the fake ring to this moment of genuine contentment. It hadn't been linear. There had been backslides and bad days, nights where loneliness felt crushing, moments where I'd questioned every decision that led me to marrying someone who'd deceived me so thoroughly. But there had also been unexpected gifts. Friendships deepened. Self-knowledge earned. A clarity about what I wanted and what I'd no longer tolerate. The fake ring had been the catalyst, the crack that exposed the foundation's weakness. But it hadn't been the whole story. The whole story was about a man who'd lost himself trying to maintain a marriage that was already ending. Who'd mistaken politeness for connection, routine for intimacy, shared space for shared life. The divorce had forced me to confront those failures, to own my part in the slow death of something that had once held promise. And in owning it, I'd been able to let it go. I'd learned that love, real love, doesn't require you to shrink or perform or guess what version of yourself is most acceptable. It doesn't stage proposals with costume jewelry or rewrite history to justify betrayal. Real love is honest, even when honesty is hard. It's two people choosing each other, day after day, not because they're trapped but because they're free and still choosing the same thing. I hadn't had that with Nicole. Maybe I'd have it someday with someone else. Or maybe I wouldn't, and that would be okay too. Because I'd learned the most important thing. I could choose myself. And that choice was enough. The sun dipped toward the Olympic mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast. To endings that are really beginnings. To fake rings that reveal real truths. To the courage it takes to walk away from what's dying so you can find what's alive. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Claire and I are grilling tomorrow. You in? I smiled and typed back. I'm in. Because I was. Fully present. Fully myself. Finally free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.